Imagine the sensation of walking through the swaying, waist-high stalks of an ancient savanna 100,000 years ago. The sun is rapidly bleeding out below the horizon, pulling the last precious threads of daylight from the sky, when a sudden rustle in the brush behind you makes your blood run completely cold. As you slowly turn around, your terrified gaze meets two pale yellow eyes reflecting the creeping sad face of a cave lion that is an astonishing 25% larger than any modern lion stalking the African plains today. A 700-pound mountain of coiled muscle, razor-sharp claws, and bone-crushing teeth that has locked its vision directly onto you. In this horrifying, suspended second of realization, you are forced to confront the cruelest joke of human biology, because you are holding no gun, you carry no knife, and you do not even possess a sharpened stick to defend yourself. Your hands end in soft, flat, entirely useless fingernails. Your teeth are blunt instruments meant for mashing roots rather than tearing flesh, and your legs are tragically slow, meaning you cannot outrun this monster. You cannot overpower it, and you cannot scramble up a tree fast enough to escape its lunging strike. When you look at our species from a purely biological standpoint, human beings are walking evolutionary errors, a creature so profoundly unequipped for the brutal reality of the prehistoric wilderness that it is a mathematical miracle we did not vanish into the earth 100,000 years ago. If you were to place a human next to a chimpanzee, our closest genetic relative, the physical inadequacy becomes almost embarrassing, because an adult chimpanzee possesses 3 times the raw kinetic strength of a human being, is armed with terrifying canine fangs, and can launch itself 30 feet up into the safety of the tree canopy in a matter of seconds. Yet even these muscular, agile primates are regularly hunted and killed by leopards. We were vastly slower than chimps. We were infinitely weaker. Our upright posture turned us into walking billboards for every hungry predator on the horizon. Our night vision was disastrously poor. Our sense of smell was dangerously mediocre. And our infants were born so premature and helpless that they could not even walk for a solid year, spending their days screaming and crying loudly, enough to broadcast our location to everything lurking in the shadows. By every conceivable metric of natural selection, humanity should have been quickly, violently erased from the fossil record, leaving behind nothing but scattered bones in the dust. Yet all of the legendary apex predators that once terrorized us are completely gone, and we are still standing. For centuries, modern people loved to flatter themselves by painting our ancient ancestors as noble, fearless hunters who dominated the prehistoric wilderness with spears in hand. But the cold, hard dirt of the earth hides a much darker, far more terrifying truth. A truth that was violently uncovered in 1924, when an anatomist named Raymond Dart examined a tiny, ancient skull unearthed from the dusty rock of South Africa. This artifact, which would fundamentally change our understanding of human history, belonged to an early human ancestor, a small, fragile child no more than 3 years old. But what made the skull so chilling wasn't its age. It was the 2 distinct, perfectly spaced puncture wounds driven directly through the child's delicate eye sockets. Those gruesome holes were a flawless, exact geometric match for the canine teeth of a prehistoric leopard, serving as undeniable, heartbreaking proof that this child was not the victim of a tragic fall or a disease, but was snatched up and killed as prey. This single skull shattered the arrogant myth of human supremacy, forcing us to realize that for millions upon millions of years, our species was not the dominant hunter on this planet. We were the hunted, living our fragile lives as moving meals for a rogues' gallery of apex killers that had spent millions of years slowly perfecting the evolutionary art of slaughtering large mammals. These weren't just aggressive animals, they were biological killing machines pulled straight from a nightmare, beginning with the legendary Smilodon fatalis, a saber-toothed cat, a 600-pound armored tank of a predator, built low to the ground and armed with horrifying 11-inch canine teeth designed specifically to puncture the thick throats of massive prehistoric bison and camels. This cat did not rely on long, exhausting chases, but was a master of the explosive ambush, waiting silently in the tall grass, or crouching perfectly still near vital water sources until its prey stepped just a fraction too close, at which point it would erupt from the brush at a sad pace, blinding 30 miles per hour, delivering a single devastating neck bite that meant you were dead before you even hit the ground. But if the tall grass belonged to the saber-tooth, the open plains belonged to a creature so terrifying it defies modern comprehension. The short-faced bear, known scientifically as Arctodus simus, which holds the title of the largest mammalian land predator to ever walk North America. When this behemoth stood on its hind legs, it towered 12 feet into the air, carrying 2,000 pounds of muscle on impossibly long legs that were precision engineered for endurance running, making it a completely different nightmare than the opportunistic bears of today that happily munch on berries and fish. The short-faced bear was a hypercarnivore, a creature that ate meat and absolutely nothing but meat, and it could lock onto a target and run them down at a terrifying 40 miles per hour, meaning that if you were wandering the plains and caught the eye of this towering monster, your fate was already sealed. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, neutralizing our already pathetic human eyesight, the terror only multiplied because the darkness belonged to the cave hyenas, heavily muscled scavengers and hunters that were significantly larger and stronger than any hyena alive today, carrying a jaw that could snap shut with a catastrophic bite, force of 1,100 pounds per square inch. To put that immense pressure into perspective, a modern human bite generates a meager 162 pounds per square inch, meaning these prehistoric hyenas could effortlessly crush your solid leg, bones into splintered fragments just to suck out the nutrient-rich marrow hidden inside. They moved like a relentless military unit, coordinating in massive packs of 20 or more, swarming out of the pitch blackness when early humans could barely see their own hands in front of their faces. And everywhere our terrified ancestors migrated, the horrors simply changed shape, from dire wolves sweeping across the landscape in highly organized packs of 30, to giant cheetahs and scimitar cats haunting the brush, to the nightmarish terror birds of South America, towering avian predators that stood 10 feet tall and possessed massive, hardened beaks capable of shattering a human skull like a fragile eggshell. For millions of years, everywhere human beings walk, something was actively trying to eat us. Faced with this overwhelming, apocalyptic level of predatory violence, our species had absolutely nothing to rely on. No armor, no venom, no claws, and no speed. So we had to invent a different kind of weapon. And the first of these weapons wasn't made of stone or wood, but of profound, defiant compassion. In 2001, archaeologists digging deep into the soil of Dmanisi, Georgia, unearthed 1.8 million-year-old skeleton that challenged everything we thought we knew about survival of the fittest, because this skull belonged to a deeply elderly human ancestor who had completely lost every single one of their teeth long before they actually died. In the brutal, unforgiving wild, losing your teeth is a fast, guaranteed death sentence because you can no longer chew tough raw meat or break down fibrous roots. Yet this specific individual managed to survive for years without a single tooth in their head. The only way this is physically possible is if another member of their group sat with them day after day, painstakingly chewing their food for them or carefully pounding and cooking it into a soft, digestible paste, a level of dedicated altruism that you will never find anywhere else in the animal kingdom. If a lion loses its teeth, it starves alone, and if a wolf breaks a leg, the pack leaves it behind to die. But when a human lost their teeth, their tribe wrapped a circle of care around them, refusing to let them fade into the dark. We see this exact same beautiful defiance deep within the shadows of Schöningen Cave in Iraq, where researchers discovered the 60,000-year-old remains of a Neanderthal man who had miraculously survived to the incredibly old age of 40, despite suffering a catastrophic healed broken arm, complete blindness in one of his eyes, and a crippling case of advanced arthritis. This battered, broken man could not hunt for the tribe. He could not fight off a cave hyena and he was undeniably a physical burden on a group that was constantly on the move. Yet his people completely rejected the brutal mathematics of nature, feeding him, protecting him, and carrying him through life anyway. This is the invisible shield that separated us from the beasts that hunted us. We didn't just casually cooperate when it was convenient. We cared fiercely and unconditionally, meaning that when the terror came from the dark, no human had to face the monster alone. But while love and empathy could bind a tribe together, it could not physically stop the jaws of a leaping saber-tooth, which is why our survival hinged on a monumental, world-altering discovery found, preserved in the ancient ash layers of Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. The controlled use of fire, dating all the way back an astonishing 1,000,000 years. When a human being sparks a campfire to life in the wilderness, they aren't just creating warmth, they are instantly establishing an impenetrable 30-foot diameter circle of absolute guaranteed safety. Because the deep, instinctual terror of open flame is hardwired into the genetic code of nearly every predator on Earth. Even today, massive lions roaming the African savanna will actively avoid the flickering glow of a fire, meaning that for the very first time in our harrowing evolutionary journey, we had a weapon that made the monsters hesitate, providing us with precious light when our pitiful eyes failed us, and offering crucial warmth as we migrated into freezing climates that our thin, hairless bodies were entirely unsuited for. But the most profound gift that fire bestowed upon humanity was not just safety. It was the outright conquest of time itself, because before the hearth, a human's day abruptly and terrifyingly ended the very second the sun vanished, forcing them to wedge themselves into hidden shelters and sit in paralyzed, silent darkness until dawn broke. Once we tamed the flame, we suddenly gained 3 to 4 extra hours of highly productive waking life every single night, gathering around the glow to painstakingly craft sharper tools, recount the movements of herds, and refine complex plans. Furthermore, throwing raw meat into those flames unlocked a biological cheat code, as cooked food is vastly easier for the stomach to digest and significantly denser in available calories, unleashing a massive surplus of metabolic energy that our bodies funneled directly into growing exponentially larger brains, equipping us with the advanced problem-solving processing power required to finally fight back. Even with fire and larger brains, we still couldn't win a sprint. Our absolute top running speed maxes out at roughly 28 miles per hour, and we can only maintain that desperate pace for a very short distance. Whereas a saber-toothed cat could explode to 30 miles per hour in just 3 seconds flat. But as our brains expanded, we realized we didn't actually need to outrun anything, because our bodies possessed a terrifying superpower that no other predator on the planet could match: the ability to run for hours upon hours without ever stopping. This gave birth to the brutal, relentless art of persistence hunting, where our ancestors didn't bother trying to violently chase an animal down at top speed, but instead casually tracked it at a slow, steady, rhythmic jog, just fast enough to force the panicked prey to keep moving under the boiling sun. While human beings are incredibly unique, because our millions of sweat glands allow us to dump body heat while in continuous motion, heavily furred quadrupeds simply cannot sweat, meaning they eventually have to stop running so they can pant and lower their skyrocketing internal temperature. By relentlessly jogging behind them for 3, 4, or even 6 agonizing hours, humans never gave the animal a chance to cool down, pushing it to run, stop, overheat, and run again in a cycle of mounting physiological collapse until the magnificent beast simply folded onto the dirt, completely paralyzed by heat stroke, allowing a slow, heavily breathing human to casually stroll up and end its life with a heavy rock. Humans are the only species on Earth capable of this relentless marathon predation, and it was entirely powered by our unmatched pattern recognition as our expanding brains evolved to read the chaotic wilderness like an open book, understanding that a snapped twig meant heavy footfalls, while the depth and spread of a dirt track communicated exactly what animal made it, how massive it was, and precisely how long ago it had passed. We eventually turned this forensic genius against the very monsters that hunted us, tracking predators to sad-faced cats almost exclusively ambushed near water at dusk, realizing that cave lions would refuse to cross a barrier of fire, and observing that the towering short-faced bear was a solitary territorial giant rather than a pack hunter. We watched in the shadows, we memorized their behavior, we whispered this vital intelligence to each other around the safety of the fire, and we ensured that every single successive generation compounded this life-saving knowledge until the hunters became the hunted. As our knowledge deepened, our tactics shifted from defensive survival to highly organized, lethal aggression, completely reinventing the concept of the hunt by layering it with complex communicative strategy. While a pack of wolves might successfully surround a prey animal, their actions are governed by raw, unthinking instinct, whereas humans hunt with meticulously assigned roles and complex linguistic planning, deliberately driving a terrified herd toward a hidden cliff face, communicating silently across distances, and waiting in ambush at the bottom of the drop to cut off any possible escape route. This transition from helpless prey to apex tactical units was cemented roughly 400,000 years ago in Germany with the crafting of the Schöningen spears, brilliantly engineered, perfectly balanced wooden throwing weapons that were aerodynamically designed to fly through the air and inflict fatal wounds from an astonishing 30 feet away. For the first time in millions of years, a human being could kill a monster without having to stand within striking distance of its claws, meaning that a well-coordinated squad of 5 humans armed with these long-range projectiles and a solid plan could effectively surround and execute a saber-toothed cat before the massive feline could even land a single bite. We finally stopped running away into the dark, and we started, actively, aggressively, hunting the nightmare. Around 50,000 years ago, this unprecedented, highly adaptable super predator, armed with fire, spears, and relentless endurance, began to migrate rapidly out of the African cradle, pushing into the vast, unknown expanses of Europe, Asia, Australia, and eventually the Americas. And everywhere our ancestors planted their feet, the mighty megafauna that had terrorized the planet for eons began to systematically vanish from the face of the earth. The fearsome saber-toothed cats were entirely wiped out 10,000 years ago. The massive cave lions disappeared 14,000 years ago. The towering short-faced bears vanished 11,000 years ago, and they were followed into oblivion by the woolly mammoths, the giant sloths, and the skull-shattering terror birds. While the scientific community still actively debates the exact mathematical balance between humanity's hunting pressure and a rapidly shifting global climate, the brutal chronological pattern remains completely undeniable. On every single continent we ever reached, the giant predators quickly went extinct within just a few thousand years of our arrival. Evolution had blessed every single predator on Earth with one highly specialized, inflexible advantage, whether it was blinding speed, bone-crushing strength, lethal venom, or perfect camouflage. But evolution gifted human beings with the ultimate weapon of adaptability. We couldn't outrun the terrifying short-faced bear, so we invented aerodynamic spears to kill it from a safe distance. We couldn't outbite the crushing jaws of a cave hyena, so we banded together in complex groups to overwhelm it, and we couldn't pierce the pitch-black night like a cave lion, so we tamed fire and literally turned the dark into day. For 2 million brutal years, our ancestors were nothing more than soft, defenseless prey, hiding trembling in the high branches of trees, running desperately from moving shadows in the grass, and weeping helplessly as our children were dragged away by leopards into the dark. But our biological frailty was exactly what forced us to invent, driving a species born with every conceivable weakness to harness fire, weapons, and build an unbreakable bond of empathy that compounded over thousands of generations, until the slowest, weakest ape on the savannah transformed into a force of nature that no predator on Earth could ever evolve to fight.